You're listening to WKDW Radio 97.5 and KDWRadio.com, broadcasting from the Bishop West Real Estate Mobile Tower right here. And I said Bishop West.
Yes, you did.
So I did say that. And so that's old school, and new school is it's actually Remax Palm Realty. And the beauty is uh, we've got a lot of great things happening at the radio station. Remax Palm Realty is part of our new advertising. We've got Lions Title and Trust, part of our new advertising. We also have the Hardin Insurance Group, Allstate Insurance on Toledo Blade, also another new advertiser with the radio station. I've got a very special guest in the house, and I had a couple minutes to talk to her, but she does not know this. But I am the proud participant at the radio station. I am the station manager at WKDW Radio. We are up and running at a different clip, and we look forward to working with all businesses and listening to citizens and getting a lot of things accomplished. RJ Malloy is forever embedded into what we're doing, and I just he is the side car to my motorcycle as I go through this, and he's an asset to the station and the direction that we're going. And he's been gracious enough to let me take a little bit of a leadership role here that he has tucked me under his wing for a while. And now he said, let's go. And we're ready to go. We've got great staff there. We've got a great focus. We've got great vision. I was at a BNI meeting this week, and I look forward to working with Mike Morales on lots of projects out there. And one of my favorite topics as I've grown through my process of being a radio show host is talking with uh, Commissioner Alice White, who has been an asset to our city, who is the tree lady forever in my eyes and many people. And the ones that don't believe that, you can kiss my behind and know that I mean it. Get a life, get over yourself. There are people that we have to learn to respect on what they do. And we also have to appreciate the fact that people grow and they do things not for themselves when they're in the leadership, but they do things for others, and they do things because they care. And I'm making this statement not because Commissioner White asked me to make this statement, but I respect every minute that she fought for this city during her reign and before and now after. And she's got an event coming up. And I reached out to her and I said, let's talk about it. But I also wanted to talk to you before we started talking about the tree workshop, about what it meant for you to be a city commissioner. And I remember the first interview I had with you, and the tree lady said to me, I want to get a good solid tree ordinance in play. And that was your focus. And then you got it, and then you grew. And you didn't grow trees, you grew as a commissioner. You took the reins of that position, and I watched you grow and develop. And you're an educator, uh, and you took education of that position to another level, and I'm proud of you for that. We were never, I would never say we were foes or enemies, but we were never as tight as we are right now. And I am so glad that we've had this opportunity to grow together as representatives of the city and the citizens of Northport, and also friends. I have a lot of respect for you.
Well, thank you, John. As usual, you can so eloquently put your words together, which is why you do what you do. But I do appreciate um, everything you said, and too bad well, I can go back and read and write it all down. But it's true. That was my main goal, is to have an effective tree ordinance, because as one who founded People for Trees in 1997. That's how long I've been at this. And it was because we didn't even have a tree ordinance in Northport at the time. We had an interlocal agreement with the county then. And uh, I and others, when I rounded them up, we went to those commission meetings, and this was before today, when you can just call on the phone and put your comment in. We had to physically go to those meetings and wait until they got around to public comment and say our 3 minutes. And starting from that, and putting it out there, and we weren't getting anywhere, which is why I went the route of putting an amendment on the ballot, an actual, having people vote to change our city charter to put minimum tree protection standards. So everything that the city went through, for example, for that amendment that didn't pass for the borrowing, that I did that. I did that as, and I'm going to start using that word I, because I'm reluctant to say that, but I did that. And that was thanks to Becky Ayich. I don't know if anybody knows who that is, but she's been a long environmental advocate. And she said, why don't you just put it on the ballot to put minimum tree protection standards in the city charter? Jacksonville did it and it passed. So just get in touch with them. And I did. And they took me through the whole process. We just reworded what they had already had approved for that, 75 word limit ballot question, and had to form a political action committee. It was just like running a campaign. We had to put in who was giving us money, where our money was going, had signs out there. This was in 2002. And even when I say that year, most people don't know the relevance of that. 2002, our building boom was in full swing. So it was like David and Goliath, okay? Because we were out there saying we wanted to have tree protection standards written into the city charter. And of course, everybody and his brother was connected with the construction industry. And, it failed 2-1. And what really bothered me is that, fast forward 20 years, people that were claiming they were environmental stewards, some of those people were standing outside with those vote no to trees signs back then, because they were connected with the construction industry. And now, when we, when in my term as commissioner, they were claiming they were the tree environmental people, and I wasn't. So those are things that I had to deal with while I was up there, and it was on sitting on the dais, and it was really, really difficult to see that. But it's a learning experience, that people are who they are, and when they're not getting what they want, they will just use any means that they need to strengthen what they're trying to do, and really not even care about anything else.
Well, you've been at this tree game, and I'd say game. I don't mean it in that sense, but you've been at this for a lot of years.
Yes, and that too, and I'm glad you're jogging my memory here, because it's been and I have all these files, and I'm now going through a purging in my house, because I don't want to leave all this stuff to my son, because but I'm gonna have to get rid of it myself, because he's not gonna know what to do with it. But I tell people there's not a development project that came along in Northport that I was not involved in. The first one being, there's a parcel up by I-75 in Sumter. There's a big bulletin board there. And the people who own that parcel had gotten just a underbrush clearing permit. And I came home one day and saw that there were piles of pine trees and piles of sable palms and piles of oak trees. And I said, this is not what they were supposed to do. And that was my first foray into going down to planning and zoning, which was where the Northport Art Center is now, and asking for that paper copy of of the underbrush land clearing permit to see exactly what it said, and then taking the city to task. And it wasn't easy. It was not. It was not easy, but eventually, they did charge that owner with a fine, and it actually went to court because the city fined them for every pine, sable palm, and oak tree that they took down. And the person who did that, the owner of that property, his defense was that palms are not really trees. And he had, which they're not classified as trees. He had a botanist come in and said, no, they're two different classifications. So all the fines for the palms had to come off the total bill because of that. And a lot of people don't know that. So it's one of the things that I would bring up when I would be having these discussions with people, that sable palms, are trees. No palm is a tree. But I said the
You,
court decided that they're not trees enough that they were taken off the fine that the owner had to own, but that had to pay. But that was my first foray into that, into really starting to bring attention to the fact that all of these trees were coming down and we weren't getting any mitigation for them. And all of these development projects, there is not one that I was not involved in. Sable Trace, Bobcat Trail, Plantation, they all had the log trucks out there. That means that they come in, they cut down the pines and they cart them away, and they get those the logs in exchange for doing the work. So it was really a nice arrangement with the developers and builders, because they didn't have to pay somebody to come in and do all that clearing and then load it up and take it to the landfill and pay the tipping fee. And people didn't seem to realize that. And that happened at Cranberry School, and I called about that because I was seeing cartloads, truckloads of sable palms, but they didn't cut them. I could tell that they were taking them somewhere to be sold. And when I called about that, I was told yes, because that's an exchange for them clearing the property so that the school board didn't have to pay for that part of the process. So through all these things, I learned a lot. I learned the business of development, and also dealing with people when the developers, the builders, who are developers, by the way. And this is what I tell people: we're all developers. If we had a house built, we're a developer. We had land developed so that we can put a house on there. And I learned that when I was trying to encourage people to keep a tree or plant a tree, and they would tell me, who are you to tell me what to do with my property? Which is why, fast forward again to when I was commissioner, when people felt it was okay, or they were within their rights to say, tell the developers they can't do that with their own property. But they're the same people that wouldn't want someone telling them what to do
correct.
with their own property. And I
Correct.
found that so frustrating, because I didn't know, I just didn't even know where to go with that anymore. Like, have people see the irony in what they were saying, but they didn't. They wanted what they wanted, which was basically, they didn't want to see that land cleared because they were enjoying it for themselves. But it was okay for them to build a house that somebody else was probably enjoying that property for. And I just found that to be, like I said, I just didn't even know how to deal with that.
Kind of like a double standard.
Yeah, it was a double standard.
Yeah.
Um,
Here's the question for you though, and listening to you, and the beauty in what we've done uh, before and after commission, you and I, is we've had discussions on trees. We've had discussions on policy now. I
yeah,
mean, when I first met you, I would have never dreamed that I would be talking commission policies and all these things. And I know that that wasn't even a focal point for you, 5, 10
right.
years ago. And yet it happened. And what did you learn through that process from and explain how you had to look at things through Alice White Tree Lady and Alice White Commissioner and try to balance that book?
Yes, and getting, getting back to what we were talking about before, that I learned early on what it is you can change and what you can't change. And I am a big uh, believer in, and I respect the logical process that you're just beating your head against the wall if you're trying to do something that is never going to happen. And one of those things involves developing property, that there are rules and regulations in place and people have a right to develop property. um, for example, today I keep hearing that word overdevelopment, and yet when I ask people to define that, nobody can come up with a definition other than, well, they're just building too much. But that's somebody's property that can be built upon. Um, and that's what I learned even more as a commissioner, that those rules are really pretty much written in stone. There's only certain instances that you can actually say no to. For example, when a developer is asking for exceptions, yes, you can say no. Uh, I don't go for that. This is what the rule is. Follow it or do it or figure out something else. um, or conditions, they're called. Those are things that you have some leeway with, but that's it. But saying no to the entire project, no, you can't do that. If they're checking all those boxes, you have to say okay. And I've mentioned this before to people that, and I hate the word approval. When they say, you know, the commission approved that building application, it makes it sound like you like it. Okay. And I kept telling people, just because you vote yes on a project doesn't mean you like it, but it just means yes, yes, yes. They followed all the, the codes, and they have all their ducks in order, in a row, and everything's in order. So you have to. Um, and I learned a long time ago, somebody, a politician, told me that 4-1 votes are what they call a political vote, because it's going to pass, but that one person um, gets to be carried off on the shoulders of his or her admirers, like, oh, so and so voted against that. And even though the whoever is putting in that application, they can contest that, but why would they go through that trouble? It passed 4-1, so they're moving on with their project. Even 3-2, they're going to move on with their project. Why would they call to task those two commissioners or one commissioner to say, we want you to explain why you didn't do that or whatever? What's the purpose? But
There's no victory in that.
right, right. And that's why this person told me those are what we call political votes, because it gets that elected official on the good side of the people, and that's about it.
And that's an easy task to take uh, when you know that it's going to pass. I've had that discussion myself, and not being in the political realm, but being in the political conversations a lot with the commission, the city staff, and building the relationships that I have over the 8 years now that I'm doing a show, and prior to that I was very involved in the city. So I think the one beautiful thing that you and I have very, very much in common is that we were involved before we started doing these other extra tasks that I never thought I would do. 8 years of radio. I'm
Hmm.
a real estate agent.
Right.
You look at my information that's out there. Everybody thinks I do radio. I don't do real estate. Well, I do a really good job of real estate too, and
Yes.
and yet the focus is what you do. You've been a citizen focused on citizens and citizenry. And I do that same thing. And there is a huge value in and this isn't a pat on the back. This is encouragement for others to do the same.
Right. Right,
And
because that seems to be so foreign to people
it is
today, to do something for your community. No, you're not going to get paid for it, but just to do it because it's the right thing to do and to be involved in your community. What did somebody call me? Uh, community not a advocate, but Joan Morgan said something, and I said I have to remember that. And here I am. I forgot what the
right,
term that she used, but she had it down pat because she's the same way. Someone who does things just because to make the world a nicer place to live in. And I did that, and not just with trees, but I did that when I mentioned I started Mommy and Me. The library just had their 50th anniversary, the
nice,
Northport Library. Um, and that building was built in 1992, and I still have that little welcome thing to that. But when I say I started my Mommy and Me program there, yeah, because there wasn't anything for very young children in Northport when I came here in 91. And my son, when he turned 2, it was like there's nothing here for kids. So I started that, and people just kind of blow that off, but those are the kinds of things that I did through the years. If I saw a need for something, I did it. And that's why I got involved with the trees, because it frustrated the heck out of me, because when I was building a house and others, it wasn't standard to clear cut everything. There were trees left on properties, and I knew that those trees could be left. If people would just understand the importance of those trees, maybe they would become the advocates for those trees,
right.
and keep them on their own property. And some people would call me because they wanted to keep a tree. In fact, there's a house on Cranberry, and every time I go by it, I have to smile because it's a big oak tree and it's on the front yard. And the couple called me and they said their builder's telling them they have to take the tree out. There's no room for the septic, blah, blah, blah. And I went there and I said, the septic in the field's going to go over here. The tree can stay. It's not going to bother anything. I said, you just have to be willing to fight for it. And they did, even though the builder was threatening to take them to court, because there's that clause in building that if you impede their ability to do their job or something like that, they could sue you. But he finally relented. He said, okay, we'll work around the tree. That tree is still there today. And every time I go by it, I smile. And there's lots of stories like that when people just needed somebody to say, it's okay. Yes, fight for this tree. It's going to stay.
Isn't
And,
the isn't the oak tree is it Busey Bank next to Advanced
yes,
Auto?
it's still there. That's right. It's the pine tree. It's a big pine tree, and there's the oak tree there.
Yes,
And that pine tree was right on the literally on the line between the right of way and the private property. And the city had said to them, "Okay, you could take that pine tree down." Again, this is when I knew there was a development coming. I would go to planning and zoning and ask to see the paperwork, and I saw the plans, and I said, this tree is right on the line. It doesn't have to go. So I pulled all of my members together, and we went out there and we had what we called Requiem for a Tree. That's just what we called it. We put a black shroud on the tree, and we had people reading things about trees, and the tree poem and everything else. And we got some publicity out of it. And then the city relented and said, yeah, it'll be okay. We won't require them to take that tree down. That pine tree is still there today. And when I look at that, I say, good deal. So it's those little successes that make me happy. And of course, I always point to the 300 plus trees we planted on Salford Boulevard. Again, that was just taking the city to task. They had tree fund money. They weren't using it to plant any trees, kept getting all kinds of excuses. And I would just come back with, well, you could do this or you can do that, until I got to the point, borrowing from my Italian ancestry. I probably shouldn't say that. We finally got down to an offer they couldn't refuse. Okay, because we answered all their concerns, and there was no reason not to use tree fund money to plant those trees because we took care of everything. Yes, we'll take care of planting them. We'll take care of watering them. We'll take care of getting the supplier. We'll get the guy with the auger to dig the holes initially. I'll get the people we did everything. And those trees are still there today. Not all of them. They've had some ups and downs with the hurricanes, unfortunately. But the thing is that that's the only arterial road that has street trees because of the efforts of people that just wanted to see that happen.
You've been involved with trees for a lot of years, and as a commissioner, not that you weren't involved in it because it was a different 4 year phase of your life when it comes to trees. What's it mean to be holding this event for your organization now post commission?
It's actually the same thing because it's the tree workshop you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
That I'm having, yes, on January 18th, there it is. And we've had these every year where people come to the workshop. I call it the good, the bad, and the ugly. The trees that are the best to plant, which of course are native trees. The good, the bad meaning there's problems with these trees, but they're okay to a certain extent. And of course, the ugly are the prohibited trees in Florida. But also, they learn how to properly plant a tree, but most importantly, the follow up, how to nurture it and water it in. That first year is really, really important. If they come to that workshop and it's a PowerPoint with lots and lots of pictures, I just go around and take pictures all the time of trees to so people can see trees in the real world, as I call it. It's great to look at a tree in a book, but when you see somebody who's utilized that tree as a buffer, like the red cedars, and they can see how effective it is, it's much more impactful than just looking at it in a picture in a book. So if people attend that workshop, they will get a voucher, a tree voucher worth $15. So when they come to the tree fair, they can apply that towards buying a native tree. We only sell native trees at the tree fair because People for Trees is only about native trees.
Talk a little bit and educate the public on and I mean this because people do things with trees here that they think it's okay, and there are indigenous trees and different things that happen here that really hurt our environment, aren't there?
You mean native trees that aren't good?
The even the like we've got situations where we've got people that come down here and plant different plantings that cause issues.
Yes, because they're not native. And
Yeah,
that in itself isn't a problem because there are plants and trees that are called Florida friendly, meaning
that's true.
they're not going to disturb that balance that we have, naturally in our native environment. So that's why they're Florida friendly. In that,
How
in that
about the ones that aren't Florida friendly?
Yeah, they are problematic because to me, they give trees a bad name. Because when people talk about, oh, we planted this tree and oh, it turned into, the roots got into this and that, and I ask them what kind of tree, well, that's why. I mean, there are people I will actually stop and talk to because there's a few houses where I live, people planted rubber trees. Rubber trees should never be planted in the ground, number one. I think it even says that on the tag that when you buy it. I'm not sure. I should look that up. But rubber trees are horrendously notorious for getting under the foundation, and they seek out water, so they will get into your septic. And even when I've told people that, they will still say something like, "Oh, but my mom loves the tree." Like, okay, I tried, but when trees like that, or what was that tree? Uh, Camphor tree, I think it was, because after the hurricane, they'll show pictures of these trees, and I said, I wish they would identify the tree, because a lot of those trees were not native and they were not good trees to begin with. In fact, what they did is exactly what they are going to do in a storm. They're going to break. They're going to uproot. But people will still keep them, plant them. Australian pines, very hot topic with War Mineral Springs that I've had with lots of people didn't want to see them taken out. They are horrible trees. They are one of the ugly trees that I'll be talking about because they are prohibited to be planted, to be propagated, to sell. They should not be anywhere. That's why Sarasota County has made such great efforts in getting rid of them in on their county property. But you know, Mill Springs, they kept them there, and you saw what happened to them after Ian. They were like a bunch of matchsticks that just fell everywhere because that's what they do.
And so, you had all these years to prior to being a commissioner. What do you feel like you accomplished with what I see as a very active commission that you served in? We had a lot of growth. We had a lot of things
Yeah.
happening. You guys worked really hard. Um, and being a commissioner, it's different than a lot of people think. You don't get to really talk to each other and do these things unless you have a workshop or on a dais. And
Yes, can't have any discussions with each
yeah,
other about anything, and to be on the safe side, should not be talking about anything because you never know. Because the rule is, even if you have any idea that it may come up in the future, so this is why, and everything is off limits. So you can't talk about things that are going on in your own community. That's what I found difficult to deal with since I was always involved in things, to not be able to talk about things that I knew about or was involved in. But that is difficult. And it's
that had to
also,
be that had to be a really tough situation because you came from a background of being able to speak up and do what you and I think again we have a lot of common ground here because uh, this show allows me to engage differently. Um, but I can't have both of we can't have two of you on the show at the same time.
right, right,
Um, and because that again, the Sunshine Law doesn't allow that,
right.
and that it has to be tough uh, to work through processes with fellow commissioners and figure out a way to work together and can't work together.
Right. And that one of the things that, and especially because, as I shared before, I have a history of things, but I couldn't share that history unless I was sitting up there on the dais. And at that time, most commissioners have a pretty good idea or a handle on the issue, but without that information, but I couldn't share that with them and for them to take that into account so that instead of starting all the way from ground zero, this was already been tried and let's move forward to where it was left off. And I found that way with, again, dealing with the environment. Like, people didn't seem to be interested, say, look, this is why we got to this point. Let's not pick up from the beginning again. Let's pick up where everything was left off. But first, you need to know how we got there. But people didn't want to know how we got there. They're just like, no, no, no. No development, no this, no that. That's what I learned in the beginning, because initially that's what I was saying too. And I realized that's not going to work. That's a losing battle. So let's see what we can do and what we can live with.
You
So
know, listening to you guys and having these discussions and learning the processes that you have to go through. And the beauty of this is that I have five commissioners on. I have staff on. I have city manager Jerome Fletcher. He
mhm.
does a fantastic job with the Q&A. It's sort of like you guys are all doing mini town halls uh, once a month, and you're rotating through the system. Um, City Manager Fletcher does a mini town hall once a month by himself.
Right.
You guys get to rotate through, and then staff comes on. I've got, Chief Taft and Deputy Chief Morales. They all do a fantastic job getting information out, content out,
Yes.
and educating the public.
Yes. And John, that is one thing that that is so different from when I moved here 30 something years ago. Because, back then and for decades, it was our city government, like all governments, were like hands off. Like who are you to be asking for this or wanting that? And today it is so different, like you said. Staff is out there, city manager is out there, and they're putting themselves front and center, and they're willing to answer questions and to really do things to help people understand the process and why this is done. And I have never seen that before in Northport. And believe me, in my early quest for saving the trees, I have to be very frank. I wasn't treated very nicely at times, but that's just how things were done.
Well,
Um, if I called out on a builder for something, I would get the little thing from code enforcement. Where's my mailbox numbers? And I knew darn well where why I got that. Like,
you
oh,
triggered somebody.
there's that tree lady making trouble again. Well, let's see
Yep.
what we can do to shut her up. I mean, I hate to say that, but that's what it was. When people talk about the old boys network, that's exactly what we had in Northport. And I don't mean any disrespect for those who worked the system back then, but that's
That was
how it
the
was.
the funny thing, that is how it was, and that's the system we had, and you found a way to work through it.
Hmm.
And now that you've kind of run the gauntlet of
Yeah,
doing that, and now serving and still battling through and finding ways, um, where where do you see the the environmental side of Northport, and the way people handle the environmental side? That and I don't want to call anybody out by name, but that there are people that tout environmental, and they don't walk the walk, but they tout it.
you're
Uh,
right. You're right. They do a lot of talking, and this is what's been frustrating for me when people have called me out on things, and and again the social media comments before and after the election. I voted for Alice White because she was for the trees, but boy, that didn't work out that way. And I'm thinking, what did you? And I'm saying to myself, what have you done? What have you done at all? You may not be happy with how some of the things worked out, but like we started the program saying, my goal was to get an effective tree ordinance, and we got it. And by the way, that whole mitigation in that schedule in that tree ordinance, I'll give you three guesses where that came from.
uh, I have.
That came from the amendment that we proposed in 2002. That
All
whole
right,
thing about
that I didn't know.
taking a diameter and then taking a
Oh,
third
what?
of it.
Okay, yes, yes.
That whole thing, that all came from that. So it came full cycle. In fact, it's a little better because back then we were proposing that it starts at 15 inches. If a native tree has a 15-inch diameter, you take a third of that, and that's where mitigation starts. Our tree ordinance starts at 12 inches. 12 inches, so it's stricter. Um, and just to throw it in there, when when I was talking about how things were difficult and people were looking for cogs to throw in my tree wheel, so to speak. When we did that amendment and we went through the whole process of getting the signatures, they were verified. We got the the verbiage and everything. It still has to go through the commission, and that's still in our city charter that anybody can propose changes to the city charter if they follow that procedure. We did the whole thing, but it still has to be presented to the commission to actually present it to the supervisor of elections. And our sitting commissioners then refused to do that because they felt this didn't belong in the city charter. Now, That would never fly today. I'll tell you right now, the way people are, when they speak very, frankly, which is great, but then those five city commissioners said, no, we don't believe this should be in a city charter, so we're not going to present it to the supervisor of elections. And I said, what? But this is what the city charter says we can do, and we did everything that we were supposed to do. I wrote to the what do they call it? The attorney in Florida. It's not the attorney general. What are they called? Uh, the state attorney.
That's it.
And I still have that letter, and I framed it because he wrote back to the commissioner saying, "You can't do this. If you feel it's not legal, if you feel it's not correct, you can take that up after it goes to ballot. You cannot deny the people the ability to vote on it if the process has been followed." And like I said, it didn't pass anyway. But that again is some of the nonsense that I and others had to deal with how the city used to be. That would never happen today.
You kind of set the standard before commission. You had to do what you did through commission, and you had to make some adjustments. So I I kind of chuckle a little bit when I hear people say she's not for trees, because that's nowhere near the truth. And anybody that spends 30 seconds with you, or 15 at that, already knows that that's not the truth. I don't know too many people who can regurgitate uh, things about trees like you do. If there is a tree question, uh, I, you're in my phone, uh, and I'm going to call you. Uh, and that's the value of having a citizen who has attached themselves to a cause and has embedded themselves in the cause.
Hmm.
Um, I wonder though, are your 4 years, are you proud of what got accomplished as far as the trees go? And explain why you're proud of that.
Yes, that was my number one goal, and it was accomplished. That we do have a tree ordinance that actually puts a value on trees, and that when trees are removed, there's money paid. There's a mitigation required. Before, it was 30 inches. 30 inches is where it started to get mitigation for a tree. That's a big tree. And the likelihood of a pine ever making 30 inches diameter is next to nil. It's not going to really happen. In fact, there was that big pine that was on Sumter where the new development's taking place. It's almost finished, I think. The Heron Creek apartments over there. It was a massive pine tree. And when the power lines came in I think that was the early 2000s, FPL cut that canopy vertically in half. And I was so devastated that they did that. Because that was actually the signature tree of People for Trees. I used that picture for all of our newsletters, and I had to stop using it because it didn't exist like that anymore. But when that development was happening, the Heron Creek development, people were up in arms about that pine tree that was going to have to go down. But that pine, as big as it was, it still wasn't 30 inches in diameter. It was just incredible. So what I'm most proud of is the fact that our mitigation starts at 12 inches, native trees, that they're going to be uh, considered valued because you're going to pay for something for them. It doesn't mean you're going to stop people. For them, if they say, just tell us how much it is, we'll write a check, but you're getting that check. You're getting that money, and that money is to be used to plant trees and also other things. I think you remember the commission in which I sat on, we had a couple of different public meetings about what people wanted to see that money used for. And what I was actually frustrated with is it seemed to be for everything but planting trees. I thought, this is interesting. I fought so long to get tree mitigation money, so to plant trees, but now we're talking about putting pollinator gardens and making beehive things, and I thought those are great. They're necessary, but I just didn't feel it should come from tree fund money. If you really are serious about maintaining a tree canopy, you have to have the means in which to replace the trees that are coming down. Um, but I'm proud of the fact that that money's there, that money, because I think it was the first year, it generated $2.5 million in mitigation fees, and that was used to start the Natural Resource Department. Again, something that I've been talking about since I served on what was then called the Beautification and Tree Council Advisory Board in Northport. Again, going back to 1998, 1999, we were talking about, why don't we have a natural resource department in this city? We're talking about trees and plants, and people were
On
talking
that
about
one.
gopher tortoises and everything else. Why don't we have, um, a natural resource department? Now we have one, and we have qualified, educated people, staff on that, in that department, so that um, we can be assured that what they're saying is okay. It's good, because back then, again, we didn't have an arborist in the city. We just had anybody going out and saying, "Oh no, it's okay, they can do that." Or early on, it was FWC. If you had a concern about a gopher tortoise, you yourself had to go contact FWC, and if they showed up, and usually they didn't because there's only so many of them around, the building would be done and gopher tortoises would be gone.
You know,
And
go ahead.
big difference. It's a big difference today, that now the signs are put up, they have to be relocated. There's a whole big process that has to be followed for gopher tortoises. But back then, there was nothing. Where Lowe's is right now, that whole parcel, there was an eagle's nest in there. There was nobody, we had nobody in the city to do anything about it. Again, it was call US Fish and Wildlife if you're so concerned. And Sable Trace, there was an osprey nest there. And one morning, oops, the bulldozer just happened to bump into the tree where the nest was, and no more osprey. So these are the things that we dealt with, and they're not happening today. That we have the tools in place, so to speak, to really oversee our natural environment. Is it perfect? No, it's not going to be, because again, some people, the only way it would be perfect is if you leave the land alone and you don't build that house. That's not going to happen. But this is the best we can do.
You've um you've had to address this with citizens, but and I've said this, you know, we all have to realize what's happening in our city. And property rights are property rights, whether it's the owner's property rights or commercial pieces that are property owned,
Yeah,
and they have property rights.
yeah,
And you know, the scope of what you the commission, um, you know, you clear cut all these parcels that are out here. You personally did that, Alice White. You personally, you know, Commissioner Emmerich clear cut all these. I could say that to every one of the commissioners. Debbie McDowell clear cut all these. Not one commissioner clear cut anything.
right.
You guys had to follow all these things that are are rules and regulations.
Right. And
And
John, I just want to interject, sorry, before I lose a thought. I tell you, it's getting later today.
yeah,
But, but people, when talk about the development coming in, they're talking about commercial development, and they're talking about like the Toledo Blade 320 project out there. Also, what I learned being a commissioner is that those large scale developments, they leave a lot of land that they cannot develop. It's either because of wetlands, it's because of uh, that they are considered to be conservation areas that they can't build on there. For example, that Toledo Blade 320, that project that's eventually coming is only going to utilize 1/3 of that property. And yet they have to pay taxes on that entire parcel on land that they can't even use. That would never be done with a 1/4 acre single family lot. To come in there, because there are wetlands on quarter acre lots. I
There.
know they're in my development. There were like ponds and there were wading birds in there, and then saw the surveyor stakes go up and all the fill brought in. That if that was sitting on a larger parcel, that would have been considered a wetland. But hey, for a house, we're going to fill it in and put your house there, and that seems to be okay. And and with these planned developments, communities like those apartment houses I just talked about for Heron Creek, they have a landscape plan, has to be approved, and they have a development order. That means that landscaping has to be maintained. They can't allow trees to die and go away and not replace them. That's not the case with homeowners. If they don't want a tree in their yard, I don't want a tree. And you have a quarter acre after quarter acre with nothing on their property, and that seems to be okay with people. Yet, look at the big, large scale development that's planting trees, palms, plants, um, and that seems to be the problem. I found that really difficult to try to make some sense or try to get through to the people about what they were saying, but they didn't see it that way. And it really comes down to pointing the finger away from themselves. This is what I want you to do, but I'm not going to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
You know that I laugh sometimes when I hear people say, you know, the commission did this, the city manager, he's
Yeah.
allowing clear cutting and even staff and you know I know you've kind of been through the gauntlet over 4 years. Um, one of the stable holds that uh, Mr. Fletcher talks about is that the amount of experience that we have on our staff, and I found the staff to be amazing
Yeah.
when I've talked to them, and you know there are people that they don't believe staff no matter what they say,
Right.
and I find that to be ironic because I don't care who you're talking to, they're not lying to you 100% of the time. I don't even the person that lies all the time doesn't lie 100% of the time. There's truth in everything, and I I look at staff and I watch how they handle themselves. I watch what they do in public, and I'm critical. I am critical of that kind of stuff, but I'm also a massive supporter of it. I
Hmm.
I, I think when you go into city hall and the engagement is respect that's given. Um, and I've said this a lot lately. You know, we have a city that's growing
Yeah.
and it's moving and it's shaking and none of it's on fire. And I say that with that's a good thing.
Yeah.
We don't have 195 people at City Hall jumping up and down and screaming at every meeting. We
Right.
have 6, maybe,
Yeah.
maybe, and
Right.
and and it's okay to have 6. You gotta have somebody at the meetings.
Right.
But I, as far as you are concerned, did you lean on staff too to bring you up to speed on different topics? And we've got maybe less than a minute here, minute and a half. Um, and I know I asked this question short, but what, what did you count on staff for extra input?
You mean before the meetings?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
if I had questions, I always went through the city manager, and he would, in turn, because we really cannot directly contact
staff.
staff.
Yeah,
Right. That is the city manager's job. He's in charge of them, so we go through him, and he would say, "I'll have staff get with you." Didn't give a name because he I guess he didn't really know who wanted to talk to me, but he would
right.
say, "I'll get someone from staff to
But
answer
that's
your
handled
question."
across that's like, and I've got 30 seconds and I don't want to end here. So, but that's like a standard though. That's like standard practice, right?
Well, it is, and that's how it has to be, because but if I were to call staff, that could be construed as I'm giving orders, or I
Yeah.
am directing staff to do something, and that's a big no-no. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
listen, Alice White, I give you a lot of kudos for continuing on. I got 10 seconds left and we're going to end the show, but I look forward to having you back on very, very soon.
Well, thank you, and thank you for bringing up the tree workshop, which is January 18th, 11 a.m. at the Shannon Staub Library.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Bye bye.